Well, this is June the 11th, 1991, and you're living at 14 Stratford, Rathgar with your eldest daughter, Bhriain.
Yes.
You were born nearly 78 years ago on the 11th of December 1913. Could you describe to me just details briefly of who your parents were and where they lived in 1913?
Well, my father was Cathal Brugha, and my mother's name was Kingston, and my mother with her sister and her mother lived at 5 Fitzwilliam Terrace, Upper Rathmines Road. And when my father and mother got married in 1912, he moved into the house
Right,
with all the ladies.
right, with his wife and sister-in-law and mother-in-law.
Yes.
Right,
And my eldest sister was born at the end of 1912, and I was born at the end of 1913.
that was Nolig then,
Yes.
your eldest sister. And then subsequently...
Then Brenda was born in 1916, May 1916. Rory was born in October of 1917. Delma was born, I think it was, must be 1919.
Yes.
And then Nessa was the youngest, and she was born in March 1922.
Right. And your parents had been married then in 1912.
Yes.
And of course, then 1922, your father died.
That's right.
So they were just married
10 years.
10 years. Right. Well, those years, of course, were formative years in terms of the family. But your father, in the meantime, had a very important political role that was evolving during those years, and that culminated then in his death in the Civil War in 1922. He had been born in 1874 and joined the Gaelic League in 1901. He had a particular passion, of course, for the Irish language. He became chairman of the Keating branch of the Gaelic League in 1908, and he continued in this post until his death. In 1909, he was a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood and was also a founding member of Lawlers Limited,
Yes.
a company for
Candlemakers.
candle makers, yes, and a company for whom he was the traveller.
Yes.
And in that role, he was also, as I've said, a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood and cultivating the spirit of republicanism that was evolving at the time in his travels throughout the country. In 1913, which indeed was the year of your birth, the Irish Volunteers were formed, and Cathal Brugha was the vice commandant of the 4th Battalion. In July of 1914, indeed, he was involved in the safe landing of the arms on the Asgard at Howth, and the safety of the arms. And moving on then to 1916, when you were 2.5 years of age, the rising took place, of course, and he was a senior figure in that, being seriously
in the
injured
South Dublin Union.
in the South Dublin Union, yes, and he was very seriously injured in that.
Seriously injured, yes.
And that, of course, was at Easter, and he was hospitalised from Easter until September of 1916. There was the 1916 plan, indeed, which he had.
Yes, and which he gave my mother
Yes.
and told her to keep it if possible. But if there was any danger that it would be taken
Found, yes.
or discovered, that she was to dispose of it.
Right.
So she put it in a tiny greenhouse she had in the back garden. And we had several raids during those years, and particularly during the Black and Tan time.
Yes.
And she decided that she'd better get rid of it, so she burnt it.
Yes, it's rather unfortunate that that had to be done, but of course that was the nature of things at the time. Subsequent, of course, to the 1916 rising, there were the execution of the senior leaders of the revolution. But your father continued with his political interest and indeed the military one, and in October of 1917 there was the All-Ireland Volunteers Convention, which coincided with the Sinn Féin FEIS, and this was basically a military and political cohesion which was taking place between the various groups involved in the revolution at the time. And Eamon de Valera became president of Sinn Féin and president of the Volunteers. Your father, Cathal Brugha, was becoming more politically and active in public life at this time, both in Sinn Féin and in the Volunteers, and his sense of republicanism was extremely idealistic. In 1918, there was the threat of conscription, of course, in Ireland to send Irish personnel into the Great War. But that problem was resolved, of course, by the end of the war. But prior to that, Cathal Brugha had in fact gone to London with a view to looking at the means by which some members of the British cabinet could be assassinated. But the problem was resolved, as I've said, with the ending of the Great War. And that was followed in December 1918 by a general election for the House of Commons in Westminster. And your father stood for the Waterford constituency in that election, and he easily won his seat, along with 72 other Sinn Féiners who abstained from taking their seats. And from this group, the first Dáil was born from these elected representatives.
Yes.
So from this group that were elected to Westminster in 1919, the first Dáil was born, with the first sitting of the Dáil taking place in the Mansion House on the 21st of January of 1919. De Valera, of course, was in Lincoln prison at the time in England, and Cathal Brugha presided over the first sitting of the Dáil and was elected President pro tem. And the Volunteers, who were the army, the Revolutionary Army, then became the army of the government of the elected people of Ireland. And you yourself, at this time, of course, were only 6 years of age, which of course was very young. In April of 1919, Eamon de Valera took over as president of the Dáil, and Cathal Brugha became Minister for Defence, till a post which he held until the 9th of January of 1922, some short time before his subsequent death. And he took no salary for this post other than an allowance of £300 for an assistant. In 1919 and 1920, there was of course an uneasy relationship between the occupying forces of the British and the new administration of the newly declared Republic. In 1920, the Black and Tans were introduced into Ireland to pitch against the IRA, and your family were at the receiving end of some provocation by the Black and Tans at that time.
Yes, we had a number of raids. The first one, they entered one of the houses about 4 doors away and came down through the attic part of the house and came right down, broke down through the ceiling onto the top landing. I can remember that night well.
And searched the house, presumably.
Oh yes, of course. And then on another night, they came to the hall door and they didn't break down the door, but they, hit it very strongly. And my aunt locked the bedroom in which my sister and I were in bed, right? It was the bedroom right over the hall. So Black and Tans came up and they broke in the door.
Mm.
But I had a small money box on the mantelpiece. And I had heard my mother say that her engagement ring had been stolen by the Black and Tans. Excuse me. So I decided they weren't going to get my money. So I hopped out of bed and took it in.
Yes.
And, well, they were the two that I can remember in Dublin. But then there was a threat that the house was going to be set on fire. So we all had to take off for Waterford, where we stayed in a house. All I can remember was that there was a ladder going up to the bedroom. And there, the Black and Tans came one night, and they had flash lamps.
Yes, this was in Ring in Waterford.
Yes,
they traced your presence to there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they had flashlights, and they came right around all the beds where we were all in bed, and
Yes.
on top of this.
As children, of course. But presumably your father wasn't there.
Oh no,
just your mother.
No.
Yes.
No.
Well, in October 1920, of course, the death took place by hunger strike of Terence McSweeney, who died in Brixton Prison. And indeed, his daughter was to have a subsequent relationship with your family in latter years when she married your brother Rory. In May of 1921, the Customs House, being the centre of British administration, of course, in Ireland, was seriously damaged by fire. And in July of 1921, a truce was agreed between Eamon de Valera and Lloyd George. And from this, in October of 1921, negotiations were opened at Downing Street in London, which was to ultimately lead to the treaty.
Yes.
And this treaty was signed on the 6th of December of 1921, basically physically dividing Ireland into the 6 counties and the 26 county republic. The signing of this, of course, was under considerable duress of the threat of a great war which would be brought on the Irish people. And it brought considerable division to the political and military personnel at the time. There was a Dáil vote on the 7th of January of 1922 on the treaty, with 64 voting for and a minority of 57 voting against. But Cathal Brugha's attitude at the time was that is the will of the people, let it be.
That's right.
Eamon de Valera, of course, then resigned as president on receiving this Dáil vote, and your father relinquished his post as Minister for Defence on the 9th of January of 1922, and was succeeded in that post by General Mulcahy, who in fact was the godfather of your now sister-in-law, Maura McSweeney, Rory's wife. The army, of course, was very split at this time in the pro and the anti-treaty, and the civil war basically commenced with the four courts being seized on the 14th of April of 1922.
Yes.
The four courts were then shelled on the 28th of June of 1922 on instructions from the British Prime Minister Lloyd George. Oscar Traynor occupied a number of positions with headquarters in the Gresham Hammond buildings in O'Connell Street, and your father, Cathal Brugha, reported to him. When the four courts were taken, the guns were then turned on O'Connell Street, and Oscar Traynor and the others accompanying him withdrew by agreement with Cathal Brugha. On the 5th of July of 1922, your father was the last remaining person in the Hammond buildings, and on leaving the building was shot by a single bullet and sustained a wound from which he died 2 days later on the 7th of July 1922 in the Mater Hospital.
That's right.
And you were 8.5 years of age at this time.
Right. I've heard since then that when he was brought to the Mater Hospital, there were 24. He had 24 bullets in the pockets, in 12 in each pocket of his
ammunition, which he could have used himself.
Which he had got them. He had given them to the nurses. That was it. He took them out of his pockets and he'd given them to the nurses.
Yeah.
And the nurses had them, brought them back up to the Mater.
Right.
And I think 3 of them handed them up, but one didn't, and she only handed them up recently. But they're all now in the museum, I believe.
I see.
I must check it out.
Right. And you were 8.5 years of age, of course, being the second eldest, and your youngest sister Nessa was only 4 months old at this time. So your mother, Cathal Brugha, then was a widow with 6 very young children.
6 very young children.
Could you describe now your father, of course, had died, and the funeral then that your recollections of the funeral?
In a kind of a way, you know.
Yes.
I remember they quickly made up some black frocks for us.
Yes.
And we were brought over on the day that he died. We were brought over to the Mater, and I could still remember that his body was quite warm.
Yes.
I didn't really know that he was dead, you know.
Yes.
And then that would have been the 5th.
It was the
No,
7th
it was
he
on
died.
the 7th he died. Yes, it was on the 7th. Well, then that was the day that we went over.
Yes.
And then at the funeral, well, of course,
It was an Irish funeral.
yes, it was. Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah.
Very long funeral. And a number of Jesuits walked in it. I think there was a Father McMahon was very prominent in the Jacob order, and he was one of those who took part in it.
Yes. And living in your family home then were your mother, Kathleen, of course,
Yes.
and your aunt.
And my aunt.
Yes.
My aunt, whom we used to call Adio.
Right. And you lived where at that time then?
We continued to live in Fitzwilliam Terrace.
Right.
For
number of years.
1937.
Yes. And the income then, what was the
Well,
source
my
of income?
father, you see, was a partner in Lawler Limited.
Yes.
There were two brothers, Vinnie and Tony Lawler, and my father. And he was the traveller.
Yes.
So that's how he made all the contacts around the country.
Yes.
So he made an agreement with them that if anything happened to him, that they would pay my mother, I think it was something like 600 a year,
Yes.
until my youngest sister would be 16. And they kept that bar.
Right. So your mother had a small
Right.
pension, a modest pension.
She had that amount of money, which
Yes.
of course was very little, but it was substantial
Yes, at the
from
time.
that time. But
Yes.
she decided that you couldn't possibly bring up a family on that, so that she'd have to do something.
Yes. Could I just address the issue? She had a brief political career herself then.
Oh
that
yes, that's right.
She took on at that time
In
then.
1923, she went up for election
Stood for the Dáil.
for the Dáil, for Sinn Féin,
Yes. And abstained.
and she was elected. And then, of course, in 1926, I think it was, the Fianna Fáil was founded.
Yes.
I remember we were on holidays down in Wexford, and we came into Gorey on one particular day. I remember this day where and she bought the paper and Fianna Fáil was being founded by
Yes. And they were going to enter the Dáil.
Excuse me.
They
They
were
were going
to
to enter the door,
Right,
yes,
and
and
she-
take an oath to the king.
Right. And she was continuing to
And
abstain.
yes, yes.
Yes. Was that 1926 or 1927? Do you recall?
27 it
yes.
was, yes. 27.
And she was re-elected in that election, of course.
She
to the
was.
Dáil. But that was her final standing.
That
since
was
she
her
did not
final
stand
standing,
for Dáil
because
any further.
she had already started in business in Nassau Street, number 19 Nassau Street.
Yes. That was in
That
1924.
in 1924.
Yes.
And so naturally she'd have to devote all her time and energy to the business. So she worked away there, and she sold mostly Irish goods, particularly
Yes.
things that were made by prisoners in the Curragh, and anything made
Yes.
from Carrigaline pottery and things like that.
So Kingswood was established in 1924, and this final election, which she took place prior to withdrawing from political life, was in 1927. And you were sent then to a boarding school in
Well, I was in
Australia.
boarding school before that.
Yes.
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 Well, yes, we were sent away to boarding
When you were about 9 or 10 years of
Yes,
age, yes,
yes.
You went down to Roscrea,
Mhm.
to the Sacred Heart Nuns.
My aunt was a nun in the order. That's how we happened to go there.
Yes, your mother's sister.
Yes.
Yes. And the family continued to live in Fitzwilliam Place then until 1937 when they
William
moved.
Terrace.
Fitzwilliam Terrace.
Yes.
And they moved.
Until 1937.
And they moved then to.
We moved to Temple Gardens.
Yes.
But I mean, I must go back there because I mean, she transferred from 19 Nassau Street in 1932 down to O'Connell Street. She
But that was
transferred
Kingston's. I'm
business.
talking about where you were living.
Oh yes.
Yes, you were. You lived in Fitzwilliam Terrace and then moved to Temple Gardens.
Mhm.
And then subsequently in 1947 your mother moved to Rathdown Crescent number 9.
Yes.
And she died there then in 1959. So can I just go back to the Kingston story then, that having been established as a ladies' business in 1924
Mhm.
in Nassau Street.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, she often went to England to buy things for the ladies' department, and sometimes she'd wear 8 frocks coming in to avoid tax. And but she decided that the women's fashions changed too quickly and too often, and that she would turn it into a men's shop.
Yes.
So, well, she didn't do that actually till 1933, I think. But in 1932 she moved down to O'Connell Street, and that was the year of the Eucharistic Congress.
Yes.
And O'Connell Street was being rebuilt after 1916.
Yes.
a firm by the name of Marr and Hayes. And Mr. Marr was a very, very nice type of man from Cork. They were both from Cork. And they built all that side of O'Connell Street.
Yes.
So later she took over the corner shop and
Yes.
another shop, the tailoring, on her, just on her own.
Yes.
She really was a wonderful person.
She had a number of premises, of course, yes, in O'Connell Street.
She had afterwards.
And she subsequently moved then to Georgia Street and Grafton Street, indeed.
She did.
But
she had an excellent manager, Dermot Hamilton, who came into Kingston in 1928. He was a young man that time.
Yes.
And he was an excellent man.
Yes.
And never looked, wasn't grasping type at all.
Yes. And he spent.
So he spent all his life in Kingston.
Yes. And Oscar Traynor had an involvement too, didn't he, in the early days?
Yes,
he actually,
when she had the shop in Nassau Street, he used to do printing in the basement of the shop.
Yes. And your family then, yourselves, your sister Nellig worked in the shop for a short time.
Yes. And I worked in it myself.
Yes.
For about 10 years.
From about 1937 until 1947.
47.
When you had married, of course.
Yes. I got married in 1946.
Yes.
And then Sean, your father.
Yes.
I persuaded him to take my place.
Yes. And your brother Rory then,
he was already there since about 1945, I think.
And he remained there until its final closure in 1979.
1979.
Yes. And what of your sisters, Brenda and Nessa?
They didn't. They did other things. Nessa's a doctor and Brenda entered the bank.
Yes.
So.
And Delma then, your sister Delma?
Yes, but she worked for quite a long time.
Yes.
In one of the.
She was in Grafton Street, I think, and for many years, and prior to that in Georgia Street, I think over a period of 25 to 30 years. And as you said then, your husband, Sean O'Brien, he...
47. There until...
Yes, 1939.
Yes.
Your mother herself, of course, worked there until about 1957, 2 years prior to her death.
Yes, indeed, she used to go in there. Yes. It meant so much to her.
Yes.
Having built it up, no wonder it did.
And in its heyday, it employed up to 50 or 60 people?
Yes, 50 people, about 60 people.
Yes.
Easily 60.
And many of them, of course, in 1979, when its closure, had spent all their working lives there.
Oh, there
really
were some of them actually
substantial.
over 40 years there, yes.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
If I could just go back to your own situation then, Mother, you were educated initially in the St. Louis Convent in Rathmines prior to your father's death. And then you went to Roscrea at about 9 or 10 years of age.
Yes.
What would you be your recollection of your feeling at the time? You were very young then, of course.
Oh, yes, I must say I wasn't keen on boarding school at all.
Yes.
No, I'm not very keen on boarding schools.
Right. And you continued.
But however, I mean, there was no way out. There was just
Yes.
no way out. It was impossible to run a business and have a whole crowd of children around you at the same time.
No. And you left school then, you were just gone about 17 and a half years of age in 1931.
And I did matric.
Yes. And then
I went to college and I did a BA, a BCom and a higher diploma.
Yes. And Fiacalon Corda Whaling.
Oh, listen, son. Ní ach nuair a cós go dtéana oscair a higas a líad gaeilge a bhí agam. Agus thucríos a magna go bhfuil mín an gaeilge le bhait a gceart. Agus níor bhachas léine ach bí tú lís le tascaile.
As Kirby beat son.
Well, Éireann Liam té is táchtí. Agus an son bhí mar a bhaldrathe a fós Martin ó Tlachairte. Bhí sé mar éideachán de bhlíar dhéanta stola. Agus céir a bhí an is. Mórí Cortlin, well, ní a bhéine sin as dún Garván sin. Agus bhí céir a bhí ó Mórín ní hé.
Bhí
a fós mí háfar téir.
Mí háfar téir. Agus bhíoh comógaí agus
Céilí
agus
sin really hand was more hand.
agus bhí bainte go freisin le cumann amán le
Coming to Manon, I was not to get Manon a public fair.
cad bhí ar siúla go san.
Well, Fidre, a cowru leis na prisúnig yn cyd ysmod yn ama. Balw ar i gyda gys masin de cwnid. Cwn lani da.
Erhard is na lení.
Yeah.
So during that time, of course, the early 1930s, there was a subsequent election in 1932, during which time Éamon de Valera took power.
Yes.
And one rather felt this would be the end of the jailings and of the hunger strikes.
Yes, that's what we thought. That's what I thought.
Yes.
But it wasn't so at all. In 34, 35, 36, there were lots
Yes.
of people arrested, and some very well-known people like Mas Toomey and John Joe Sheehy and people like that who are taking a great and very eminent part in the Republican movement from 1916 on.
Yes. And that continued
And
down.
they were, yes, that continued on, and in 41?
Yes.
Is that too far ahead now?
No, that's going to the war years.
1941 now, the Paddy McGrath, who was a very fine character. Their family had a business, a blind business in Angel Street.
Yes.
They supplied ordinary blind, but Venetian blinds and that kind of thing. So Paddy McGrath was arrested in Rathgar, where there was they broke into the house. The guards broke into the house, and there was a gunfight, and one of them was shot dead.
Yes.
So Paddy McGrath, and I think it was it Seamus Hart or Michael Hart, I can't remember his Christian name, were arrested and taken to Mountjoy and later executed.
Yes.
On the 6th of September 1941.
I see. And you were present
And,
at the
well, I was
waiting.
there the night before. His brothers and family didn't know where he was, whether he was down in Portlaoise, up in Arbor Hill, or in Mountjoy. And I went up to Arbor Hill in the car. The car didn't go off the road in 1942. In 1941. And his brother was there, 2 brothers were there. And they didn't know whether he was there or where he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I'll drive down North Circular Road.
What time of the day was this now?
At 5:30 a.m.
Yes.
I'll drive down North Circular Road and I'll see if I can get any information in Mountjoy, because I knew from visiting Mountjoy with a number of people, particularly girls that were interned there, I used to go up there at least once a week, so that I knew all the guards at the door.
Mm.
And when I went to the door, a guard by the name of Brophy was there.
Yes.
And he said to me, they've been executed. Now on my way down, I heard the shots. I heard shots being fired.
Yes.
And I figured, that must be it.
Yes.
Now Brophy, strangely enough, was very upset. His wife's sister was a nun in the convent in Armagh, where my aunt was a nun. And he really felt it very much.
Yes.
So I went back up and I just said to Larkin, well, I said, it has all happened down there in Mountjoy.
And naturally, look, you were very upset about
Oh,
that.
terrible.
And indeed, in 1941, 2 people died in hunger strike, didn't they? There was a Jack
Yes,
McNeil
in
and
April
Tony.
of 1941, Jack McNeil and Tony Darcy died on hunger strike because they didn't want to wear the prison clothes that they were trying to force on them.
Yes, yes. And you were, of course, in those years then quite active and involved.
Well,
in
I was
prisoners' dependents.
secretary of the prisoners' dependents, and
Yeah.
I used to collect, with the help of others, in Shelburne Park. Paddy O'Donoghue was the manager of Shelburne Park. It was run by Kerryman, and he gave us permission to go down there every Saturday night. And the 3 Mirrelson brothers, Joe, who was the eldest, Louis, and Joe, Louis, and Michael.
Yes.
They contributed every single week to the prisoners' dependents, and did a whole lot of others whose names I can't remember. One of them was Tom Keenan.
Yes.
He was from Roscommon.
Yeah.
But there were all the bookies contributors.
Yes. And his son then became president.
Yes, because his son was Donald Keenan, who became president of the GAA later.
Yes. Yes. And you used to have sales then, fundraising sales.
We
as
had
well.
sales then in the Mansion House.
Yes.
And did I mention before about the Honourable Anne Broderick?
No.
She was the sister of Lord Middleton, who was of course pro-British, and who had built a prison, not a hospital, down in Slieve, County Kerry, for the British soldiers during the war. But she was very much anti-British, and she used to come up to these sales, and she'd bring up a bag of potatoes and brown bread and crockery from Carrigaline and anything she could lay her hands on. And we'd meet her at the station, and she'd want to carry everything herself, and of course she couldn't. But she always stayed with Dr. Kathleen Lynn in Belgrave Square, and she brought her food for the time. She was a very independent type of person.
Yes.
She brought her food for the time she was there.
My goodness.
And then, of course, what year was that now, in 1944, I think it was, yes. There were a number of Kerry lads interned or in prison in Arbor Hill.
Mm.
And she told me that she was coming up to see them, and that she was, would I bring her there? So I said I would, of course. So we arrived, and the Mick Lennon, who was the governor, was most gracious to her, brought her inside and had a fire lighting in preparation for her visit, and left her there with the Kerryman. And when she was coming out, these were her words: "I'm going to do something that I never thought I would do. I'm going to shake hands with that Free State officer." And she did.
She was quite impressed with him personally.
Oh, she was, yes.
And you were involved in this President's Dependence with your mother. She was on the committee too.
Yes,
she
we
was,
were
yes.
both on the committee, yes.
And you used to visit prisoners' wives.
Yes, I used to call to some of them.
Yes.
Joe Clark, who was a very eminent member of the Prisoners' Dependence, he
Yes.
did most of the delivery of money, but I had a few I used to call to.
Yes.
And amongst them was Susan O'Hanlon,
Yes.
who lived in Innisfallen Parade.
Yes.
So
Her husband was
and
in
her
charge.
husband was Jimmy, and he was in Mountjoy,
Yes.
in D Wing in Mountjoy.
And those Paddy Cummins' wife then.
Yes,
Who wasn't
yes,
there,
we
yes.
called to her as well.
Yes.
Yes, she lived in Dundrum.
And you had one odd situation then of one prisoner who had.
Yes, we had one, but it was only afterwards we discovered, one of the meetings, somebody informed us that this fellow had a second wife looking for money.
I see. Now, how did you deal with that?
Well, we had difficulty finding out which was the right wife. I can't remember what happened, but we certainly weren't going to pay two.
Yes. And that whole issue then of the prisoners' dependence occurred then in more recent years, in 1971 with internment in Northern Ireland, when I as a child would recall you fundraising in
Yes,
that
that's right. A committee was set up
Common
called
Bond.
Common Bond, and I was asked to join it, so I collected a few neighbours, Maeve O'Kelly, what you call her,
Mrs.
Donna
O'Brien.
Bryn, Jean O'Brien,
Yes.
and Marie O'Brien.
Yes, Mary O'Brien was very supportive too.
So the four of us used to canvass the whole area,
Yeah.
and we used to collect quite a lot of money.
Oh, yes.
We took on 3 families.
Yes, and you visited Belfast at that time.
Oh,
too,
we
didn't
went
you?
up to Belfast. Nóinín came,
Yes.
and Maeve, and
Right.
myself. The 3 of us went up.
Right.
And that would have been, I suppose, 1972.
One. Mm.
No, I think it was 72. Not sure.
In the
It was
internment in Northern
71 or
Ireland.
2.
Anyway. But going back then to the war years, of course, and indeed before, you had a courier role where you went on one occasion
Well,
to
that's
Limerick.
very early.
Yes.
That's when I was driving 6 weeks,
Yes.
and I was asked to go down to Limerick to collect a radio, an illegal radio, And I went down with a lady by the name of Annie. Oh, she's fabulous. And yes, she was a very fine person. She was engaged to Sean Russell, who was the chief of staff in 1939 when all this bombing took place. And she and I went down, and I was 6 weeks driving, and I can remember well. We hired the car was given to us by Sean Myler, who was had a garage there near Bagot Street. And it was the seat, you couldn't move the seat backwards or forwards. And of course it was for a man, and I had to sit bolt upright like this the whole way. And I was only 6 weeks driving. So we drove down to Limerick, and we collected the radio and turned right away and came back.
Yes.
And as I was coming through the Curragh, of course it was during the night now, and the fog had come down, and I found myself almost up at the military barracks, which of course now was
The last place in the
the
world
last
you needed
place
to
I
go.
wanted to be. And I really wasn't even used to turning the car, but I got back anyhow.
Yes.
But going down Grafton Street afterwards, I can remember well hitting off a few cars, but I didn't say anything.
On this occasion.
Yeah, I never said it. And I left the car back with Myler. And about 20 years afterwards, he said to me, "Do you remember that car," he said, "that you took down to Limerick?" And I said, "Yes." "Did you hit off any cars on the way home?" I said, "I did, indeed.
And
2 cars I hit off."
It was a kept secret for 20 years.
Yes,
And then you raised
nobody,
it.
and I
Yes,
never reported it.
yes, naturally enough. And you had on occasions to drive Sean McBride too.
Often Sean
Those
McBride
years,
and Tom
yes.
Barry and
Yes.
these important people of long ago.
To various places
drive
that they
to
were
work.
going to carry out their affairs.
Yes.
And then from the point of view of your career, you left university, of course, and you went as a teacher to Mount Rath for a short period of
Yes,
time.
for a term where I was given, I'll give you an idea now, I was 21 and I was given leaving certificate, Irish, English, French and mathematics and intermediate as well. Now think of it, a girl of 21. Gosh, it was
You weren't much
crazy.
older
So
than a school pupil.
I said to the Reverend Mother after the first term, "These children will never pass their exams if I stay here, so I'll leave."
Yes.
And
you
that
went
was that. And then I went to
Paracos. You went for a short while to Paracos as a work
yes,
experience. You went to
yes.
Kingston's then.
So I was there for about 10 years.
10 years.
Until
Open this part of our discussion by talking about Gunther Schutz, alias Hans Marschner. Could you tell me who he was and what he was doing in Ireland?
well, I imagine you could call him a German spy. He was parachuted into Ireland, into Wexford. Now I don't know what year that was. It would have been.
During the war, presumably.
It would have been. It would have been 41, or probably. Yes, the end of 41 probably was. And so let's see now. How did he? Oh yes, he was arrested. He was arrested in Wexford. That's right.
Yes.
He was arrested in Wexford, and I think they were down in the Curragh for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then some of them were transferred to Mountjoy, and they had a special wing where they only the German prisoners were kept. So
He was in
he
Ireland
used
to
to.
establish
Pardon?
contact. He was in Ireland to establish contact with the IRA.
Yes,
presumably.
that's what he was there for.
Yes.
And our traveller in Kingston's, Bill Stevens, used to go up. Travelled around the country, but he used to go up to Mountjoy, see could he get any orders up there. So he got an order from this fella for various things, but amongst them was a black Indian lamb for a coat, which he wanted for his fiancée in Germany.
He being a prisoner in the prison at the time, all in his coat.
Well, he wanted it for her right enough.
Yes.
So Bill Stevens got it. So the coat arrived up in due course up in Mountjoy. So he must have been planning escaping. So he arranged with a prisoner, one of the Republican prisoners who was in Mountjoy, that he got the design of how to find the house, you know.
Yes.
How to find the house.
This is the prisoner's own house now.
Yes, the prisoner's own, because he lived fairly near
Yes.
Mountjoy prison.
Yes.
And he gave him a map of more or less how to get to the house.
Yes.
So, of course, I wouldn't know anything at all about that part, naturally, until I got a sudden call to come up immediately to this house
From home.
from Mrs. O'Hanlon,
Yes. The wife.
the wife of the prisoner. I used to visit her every week, and to come up at once. When I went up, she told me this fella had arrived. This German fella had arrived at her door. She didn't keep him because she knew that it'd be the first place they'd look for him, so she had him transferred to some other house.
Yes.
So I had the job of finding a place for him to stay.
Yes.
And a lady by the name of Cowman, whom I didn't know, but how her name came up, I can't remember now how I came in contact with her. But I brought him out there. I met him. I met this other man in whose house he stayed, following being in O'Hanlon's. He took the number 3 bus, and they both travelled out to Sandymount. And I met them out there.
Yes.
And I brought Gunter to the house of this lady, Mrs. Common.
And boosted.
Now, in the meantime, there were photographs of this fellow with a £500 reward all over the city, and in the post offices everywhere. So naturally she got very worried, and I tried a number of other people to see would they take him, but nobody would. They didn't know. I never mentioned that it was a German that I was looking for a place for. So there was nothing to do, only take him to our own house. I mean, you really couldn't hand him up. You know,
No.
you just couldn't hand him
Wasn't the
up.
done thing.
Oh, well, you couldn't.
Yes.
And so he arrived.
Yes.
And
So
so
now you're right. You.
I collected him, and with
Yes.
Nessa, my sister.
Yes.
And I think we had 3 bicycles, we must have had.
Yes.
And we cycled.
And he was disguised.
Oh, well, at that stage, I don't think he was, because it was in the pitch dark of the night. And
Oh, right.
it was in
It was earlier
the
in
month of
disguise.
January, you know.
It was only earlier he was disguised with
Oh,
the,
yes,
with the fur
coming
coat.
over the wall, you see,
Yes.
from Mountjoy,
With
that
the,
he was
with the
disguised,
fur
yes.
coat. Yes.
So,
He came to stay with you.
he
anyway.
came and he stayed in our house, and I think he must have been about 6 weeks there. I'm not quite sure how long. I know that Mary McSweeney died during this period, and that we travelled down to Cork. My mother, Moss Toomey, who sat beside me, Austin Stack's widow, and Rory O'Rahon,
Yes.
and myself. And we drove down and drove back. We didn't have any time to sleep or anything like that. There were no signposts because, of course, during the war, so we went astray. Moss Toomey knew the way, obviously, because he was coming and going to Cork all his life. But he fell asleep, and we went astray. And I was very worried because, of course, there was no petrol to be had.
Mhm.
You just filled up wherever if you went to Cork, you filled up in Cork, somebody filled up for you, otherwise.
Yes.
So,
You took off on your journey.
fortunately, we
Yes.
arrived home safely.
So this was then about January, February 1942 that Gunther was actually staying in the house.
1942, yes.
Yes.
And he was oh yes, well now,
And who was in the house then that time? Who was staying in the
well,
house?
my mother,
Yes.
Brenda, Rory, I think, no, Rory wasn't there, Delma and Nessa, myself.
Yes. And did he offer any explanation about himself in the house, in the sense that he was there during the day? Did he talk much, or?
No, but you see, he didn't know much English, you know.
Yes.
You couldn't really have a conversation with him
Yes.
very much, because he didn't know a terrible lot of English.
He was looking for money, though, wasn't he?
He wanted money. Well, naturally he wanted money,
Yes.
because he'd had a lot of money, I think, when he landed, when he was parachuted,
Yeah.
but that was taken from him,
Yes.
you see, so I'd say the government
Yes.
had a lot of that money.
Yes.
But he got some of it, obviously, because he couldn't have bought spare coat if he hadn't
Yeah.
got some of it.
But contact had to be made by somebody. Was it with you, but through to the German ambassador?
Yes, it was through this lady who used to teach the children, Goethe's children,
Yes.
just teach them English.
Yes, at the embassy.
Yes.
Yes.
I knew her sister, so that's how I got the card. So they got money all right.
And Sean McBride.
Yes, Sean McBride delivered the money and said, for goodness sake, what do you mean and all this. And so Thanks be to God, he wasn't caught anyhow
Yes.
there.
And of course, as we mentioned to your housekeeper, Annie was in the house
Yes,
too.
she was a wonderful person, and she
Yes.
could easily have collected the £500,
Yes.
but she
A great sense of loyalty.
she was a wonderful person, and she never even got an acknowledgement from him. Not
Yes.
even an acknowledgement
Yes.
for what she had done.
Yes. So, other than those in the house, nobody else knew that he was there.
Nobody at all knew that he was there. Not
Yes.
one person knew that he was there.
Yes. And the plan was that he would go
And
to
the plan
Arklow.
was, yes, that he was to go back to Germany by boat
Yes.
with Dr. Andy Cooney, who was a well-known man at that time, and they were both supposed to go back.
Yes.
And so
Dr. Cooney actually had prepared his hands
had
for
prepared
this
his
trip.
hands. He was doing his front garden one day when I went over to see him, and he was roughing his hands up for the trip.
For sailing to Germany.
Yeah.
Yes. But you had a visit from Sean McCool, who had been released.
Yes, he called, and of course, naturally, we didn't ever tell him that we had this fellow in the house at all.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he was big enough that you could get rid of him, out of the way. So we didn't, never mention, nobody at all knew that he was there.
Yes.
And unfortunately, Sean McCool sent a message up to Belfast a day or so after that, after his visit. And in it, he mentioned that he had called to our house. The dispatch, what they used to call them, dispatches, had been taken off the courier who was travelling in the train. And in it, he mentioned that he had visited our house.
Yes.
And with that dispatch, they raided the house, and they raided Kingston's, where I was.
And what
the house.
that was April
That was the 30th of April 1942.
Yes. And you on that particular day were working in Kingston.
And I was in Kingston's, and a phone call came, and they told me this man wanted to speak to me. Would I be there, that he had a message for me? So his name actually turned out to be Sergeant MacDonagh from Mullingar. So I, of course, naturally didn't know, because sometimes I did get messages like that. So he came in with a couple of others.
Yes.
And I had this, that was the day that I had taken the Indian lamb fur coat out of the house to bring it into town so that I could leave it with a man by the name of Loch Sutton, who lived in Arklow and who had a number of children. And I was very worried because I'd already addressed the parcel with his name and everything, care of the Red Bank restaurant.
Yes.
And it was there sitting in the office when these fellows arrived in.
Yes.
So I called Mr. O'Reilly, our manager, and said, would you mind taking this up to this parcel up? It has to be delivered with the rest of the parcels. Because, they sometimes would be left in the office. But I said, would you mind taking that and put it with the rest of them? I want it to be sent to that place. So they didn't suspect anything.
Yes.
So the parcel, they never discovered. I was so worried about him because he had 7 children, and it would have been terrible.
And the plan had been that the coat would go to
The plan would be
up
that,
with
yes, you
guns.
see, they were as near as that to going away.
And he was going to get the coat in Arklow and sail off to Germany with that. Yes. So the situation at home, of course, was that the raid took place in the home, and some family
And they
members,
came to
and they arrested.
as well.
Yes, and they arrested Gunther at the house.
Yes.
And the visit to Kingston's coincided
Well,
time-wise with
more
that, more or less. Yes.
simultaneously, yes.
And could you describe the scene in the office then, with you being
Well, I'm
confronted
sure
with the
it
situation?
was constant bloody nation. But however, my mother insisted that she would come with me. Wherever I went, she went.
Yes.
She was afraid I might have been brought to the Bridewell, which had a very bad reputation. So she sat into the car with me, and we were driven to Mountjoy.
Yes. By the police.
By the police.
Yes.
Yes. And when I was going in, this priest, Father McCarthy, who has turned out to be a wonderful friend, I must have met him before, but I can't remember. But he was coming out as I was going in. And the following day, he came up to see me to apologise to me for not having accompanied me up to the ladies' prison. So I thought it was very nice of him. And of course, in later years, he married us in 1946.
Yes.
And he has been, he's had
Yes.
a terrible accident since, lost one of his legs, and
Yes, but he's still an
he
occasional
still
visitor
comes
to
and
your home
drives
now.
up here regularly to
Yes.
a meal.
And your mother, as you said, was with you that day, then going
Yes,
to
so
Mountjoy
of course
and
she had to.
to leave you there.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that was obviously very sad.
Well,
Traumatic
it must have
situation.
been terrible.
Yes. Yes. And could you describe the position then? You were presumably in a cell then or something in Mountjoy?
Oh yes, each person had a cell. It wasn't
Right.
like some places now where they're 3 and 4. No, each
Yes.
person had a cell.
Yes.
But I remember the first night, I had a mattress that had several hollows in it, you know. And I went down the next day to the wardress and I said, could I have a better mattress than that? So she gave me a
Gave it to you. And were the doors locked?
No.
No.
Oh no.
Right.
No.
So it was an open situation
Well,
within the
oh
prison
yes,
itself.
oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And there were other prisoners then there. There was.
There were altogether, I think there were about 17 there that time.
Yes.
And well, naturally we divided in two. 6 of us used to have our meal together, and then the rest of them would have their meal together, and 6 or 7, you know.
Yeah.
And the group with which I was now, mostly were Irish speakers, so we spoke Irish all the time.
Yes. Fiach an Gailing.
Bhriain could really going son agus gan do Bhriain has done so.
Sure.
Bhriain has done.
You clapped them out with them.
Bhí mórí ní chuileanna an fóbásta déanaí agus bríd ní cuineáin.
Yeah.
As colleague chun Donegal, bhí sin an bhí anna chuidí go gaiine go mar ní humó go móbó.
Yeah. Agus tá card a good fósle mór ní hún.
Ó tá anna cardúla mar ó hinna le an dat. Dina móta go fadí sin. Móta go fad.
Agus fiach Mrs. Weaver's an.
To bhí ban an de ban Mrs. Weaver banaltar baí agus bhíoh sí mar heap sí sin Queen Elizabeth. Bhí postacéib mar banaltar sin Queen Elizabeth agus nuair a bhí Alexander.
So Oswald was
No, Duke of Windsor. Bhíoh sé sin a taptagus go macht agus bhíoh sí. Bhí anna bhacha céile.
Agus fiach.
Agus lá bhí a fearr hawl I bredún na bhar.
I Mountjoy fresh.
I Mountjoy agus láháin lorug sí cead ó Seán Kavanagh. Púisi go dtí Seán Kavanagh tí sí ceiste a bheitah sí married quarters de bheith ceféin agus Frank. Mar go sí ag Mosley hawl assassin agus.
Sir Oswald Mosley.
Hanna hir na gan dúd sin ar raibh slí ar a léhéad a bheith so.
So níor airí le.
Níor airí le.
Agus fiach Miriam James saucepans a ben.
Yeah, Jenny, yes, about Miriam. It's done go Gudok a bam vart.
Yeah.
Ac Jenna Annie, yes. After be come be she Anagov, I was like come a Dorocatus.
Yeah.
Ac Jenna Annie, yes, I probably be she now.
She could answer. Agus Mrs. O'Hagan.
Mrs. O'Hagan, ban go raibh Cheshire Finnike.
Yeah.
Agus to be dinner dus na lán is dan go bíon téis is óige. Glach sí a céad cumíine gur bhí máthir stig sa fritún cuiine sin.
Agus raibh sí ábhar tapta chun an máthir
Ó hána sí sta chun
Sí sé sin anna.
Ó bhí sé bad ná.
Bránach ar fad.
Ó na a dhéananig le héit ní lá.
San cading beag bhíar í dal bhhaid gan
Bhí ar dal bhhaid a bhí sé na brán ar fad.
So while you were in Mountjoy too, you knit a pullover.
Yes.
Your
This I did a pullover for Sean.
yes.
A navy pullover.
Yes.
And it was used by many of the prisoners for their visits because of course at this stage some of their clothes would have been very disheveled.
Yes.
So he used to lend his pullover to them when they were going for a visit. I only heard that afterwards. I never saw it happening at court. But I was told about
But
it.
they were receiving you of course were in Mountjoy, and Sean, your husband, and my father, of course, was in the Curragh at the time.
Yes, down the court.
And this plover was used to receive visitors.
Yes,
prisoners.
yes, by many of the prisoners.
Yes.
Used by many of the prisoners.
Yes. And you had actually you had a secret way of communicating too with Sean, didn't you? Really?
Yes, we had a very secret way. A fellow by the name of Pat Conway, who was a Wicklow man, I think. I think he was a Wicklow man.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Why
tell me
should I
about
tell
that.
it? Hmm?
I think perhaps you should.
Perhaps I should. Well, now, it consists of this. Now, John, this is a tip for you. Um, get a pen, a plain pen,
Yes.
and use saliva.
Yes.
And write that on a piece of paper. Write whatever you want to write, what any messages you want to say.
Yes.
Write it with saliva
Yes.
on a plain piece of paper. And when the other person receives it, just cover it in ink, and you can read it.
Yes.
Do you ever try it, Russell?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
But basically you would send a letter, a fairly legitimate letter.
Oh,
at the back
an
of it,
ordinary letter.
at the back of it then
Yes.
you wrote in the secret
I
code.
wrote on this, and this is a funny thing. A couple of times, Daddy was asked where was the first letter, page of the letter, and he'd say, well, it's gone down the toilet.
Yes, you'd have to use
You
it
had
in
to,
the
yeah.
absence of any other.
He had to get rid of it.
And politically at this time, of course, then Éamon de Valera, of course, was in power, and here we use the
Yes,
daughter
yes,
of his
yes.
former colleague
Yes,
from the
yes,
early
yes.
1916 time.
Well,
Yes. There was a certain political irony in it, nonetheless.
yes, there
Um,
was indeed.
You were released then, first on two occasions. The first time
Well,
was
I
for a
came
week.
out on parole, yes, for a week at one stage.
Yes.
And then my mother had to have an operation. Which
Yes.
is, yeah, she was quite a long time ill, so I had to come out for 6 months.
Yes.
And of course, they always say, oh, well, you know, we won't go back after it. But I mean, that was one thing I would make sure that I did.
Yes.
But I remember when it was the 11th of August, 1943, indeed, that I was going back. And we had a messenger in Kingston's that time by the name of Seamus Summers. And the cars were off the road.
Yeah.
So he brought up my goods
Yes.
and handed them in.
Yes.
And I understand there was consternation. They started to ring from Mountjoy to the department to say that I was coming back in, and they didn't want that at all, you know.
Yes.
And our auditor was a great Fianna Fáiler, Liam O'Darley, and he tried to contact our house. Now I was there, but the phone never rang.
Yes.
And he couldn't understand, and I don't understand, but
Yes.
we never got any message at all.
They were somewhat embarrassed by your
Very much,
internment.
very much. Particularly because all my group had been released in the meantime, and when I went back now, I was completely on my own.
Yes.
The others had been together, you see, and I
Yes.
was on my own.
Yes.
And as Father McCarthy had always come up every Sunday in August, September, October and November, he came up every Sunday and had tea with me
Yes.
in the cell
Yes.
where I used to have my meat.
And Annie used to send in.
And he used to send in cakes and yes.
Yes.
Yes, and there was a Mrs. O'Mahony who owned a hotel there in Gardiner's Row.
Yes.
And she used to send us a Christmas dinner each Christmas.
Right.
Lovely dinner.
Yes. Yes. And could you just describe the scene as you went back the second time? Then you went in, and there was this sad couple.
Oh yes, there was one. One of them had become engaged to somebody on the other side of the
Yes.
wall. Tom Grogan was his name.
Right.
I think he was a widower.
There was a
And
shilling
he
or
become
something.
engaged. He became engaged to Maura O'Sullivan, who was a very nice person indeed too.
Yes.
She was a Dublin girl,
Yes.
and she was a very nice girl.
Mm.
And I'll tell you now how nice she was. Up in Belfast, there had been a terrible accident, and this girl, Bridie Dolan was her name, and there was a bomb. I don't accident of some kind. She lost her 2 hands and her 2 eyes.
My goodness.
And she came down to Dublin, and she stayed in Maura O'Sullivan's apartment. Now they lived in New Bride Street, where they're still their apartments, you know. They were
Yes.
very nice.
Yes.
But I mean, there were a number in the family already, but they were terribly good to her. She has died since. She was an aunt of those 2 girls. Remember the 2 girls that were sentenced in
The Price sisters.
Price sisters? She was an
Yes.
aunt of theirs.
I see.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. But there was a sherry reception going on.
There was a sherry reception,
Yes.
yes, for Maura's engagement.
Yes.
But it didn't. She never married him. She married
Yes.
somebody
Yes.
else.
And you encountered a couple coming out whose son was about to be.
I encountered a couple whose son, their name was O'Shea.
Yeah.
And he had unfortunately killed his wife. She was only 24 years of age. And he was sentenced to death. And he was executed the following morning, the 12th of August, 1943. Oh, it was. I felt sorry for myself, but when I saw that, I didn't say, really, this was frightful, wasn't it?
Yes.
A 24, I mean, sure, the fellow there must have been something wrong about him, you know.
So, at this stage, of course, as you say, all of your own group had been released from Joy. You used to have friends visits from your own friends, though, Ava and Josie.
Yes.
Could you describe that situation? This was an alien.
Pardon?
This was an alien situation for them, obviously.
Yes. They wouldn't be used to anything like this at all.
So
they used to come up and see me.
Yes.
And you had to go. Of course, you had to leave the prison to go across the kind of a garden. Yeah. And there was a hut there, and there must have been about 6 foot of a counter between yourself and your friends.
Yes, so there could be no physical contact or messages.
Shout if you wanted to say anything. But I think they must have been absolutely frightened to death coming up.
Yes, I'm sure it was quite startling.
I don't blame them too. Yeah. If I hadn't been used to it myself.
Yes, you had been a regular visitor there to visit prisoners in previous years. Yes, it wasn't quite so shocking. And then you were finally released.
Yes, the day that I was released, I remember the head wardress came to me and said, "Now I rang them a couple of times to make sure that you were being released," she said. And so I had a tea cloth there, which I gave her a present of, because she was really, you know.
Yes, what was her name?
They were very nice, really. They were. Yes. I had nothing to say about them at all. They were quite civil.
And could you put a date on that?
Oh, that was now the 27th of November 1943.
Right. And what did you do when you were released then? Were you met at the prison, or did you family?
Oh no, sure, you wouldn't know. They wouldn't know. I took the bus down Kingston's and I walked in.
So, surprise.
Consternation then.
Yes. Right.
Sure there was.
So could I turn to Sean O'Brien then, who of course subsequently became your husband. He was from a very different family background.
Well, he was from Kerry, of course, and
yes,
his father was a teacher.
Yes.
And he was a teacher.
Yes. And those belonging to him all became teachers. His sisters, of course,
yes,
were teachers.
And of course they were Irish speakers, which was the most important thing.
Yes.
In my estimation, anyhow.
Yes.
Because I really
was keen on the Irish.
I was anxious to be a good speaker of Irish.
Yes.
I really
But you subsequently, of course, achieved that very successfully.
Well,
but you met Sean O'Brien anyway then.
Yes, he was brought up to the house in 1937 by Thomas McCurtain.
Yes.
Who was a very well known. He was the son of Thomas McCurtain, who was shot.
Yes.
In 1920 by the Black and Tans, I think.
The Lord Mayor. Yes, the Lord Mayor.
Yes, that's right. And Thomas was the only son, and he was a really fine type of lad. Really fine. But he also suffered a lot of imprisonment and hunger strikes and everything.
Yes.
He's still alive, thanks be to God.
I see. And then Sean O'Brien, he was involved in the Republican movement. He was involved in the raid on the magazine port in Phoenix Park.
Yes, that's right. I couldn't know anything about that, of course, but he was involved. They raided the magazine port.
Yes.
On the 23rd, I think it was, of December, 1940.
April, was it not April?
No, it was at Christmas time. It was at Christmas time because he went down to Kerry the following morning on the train.
I see.
No, it was the time my uncle died. You see, I had an uncle who was a Holy Ghost father.
Yes.
And he died in Blackrock College.
Yes.
And De Valera, he was himself and De Valera were great pals. And of course, De Valera came to the funeral.
In Rockwell?
In Blackrock College.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So, of course, we didn't have any words with him. So we travelled down to Rockwell,
Yes.
the funeral, and I remember the icicles were falling from the trees. It was a bitter cold time, and there was no such thing as a screen wiper or no such thing as a heater in a car.
Yes.
And the icicles were literally hanging out of the trees. It was so cold. So we had to travel up with the window open, because with the steam of people breathing and that, you couldn't clean it. There was no way of cleaning it, you see.
Yeah. There were no wipers. The wipers had frozen, of course.
There were no wipers.
Oh, right.
No wipers. That was 1939.
Right. And Sean O'Brien, anyway, had been involved in this raid and took off for Kerry then, but he subsequently then...
well, he was teaching in Sing Street at
Yes.
this stage, yes. So
And-
one day they arrived to arrest him, and he had a whole lot of boys or something like that on the desk. So he just fired them. He fired them around the lads, and he hopped out through the window and he got away. But he was arrested, of course, later on.
He had to unofficially borrow a bicycle to...
Yes, that's
Yes.
right. He took a bike that was on the side of the road, but he brought it back again.
Yes, yes. And then in May 1940, which was just some months later,
Yes.
then that he was visiting...
Yes, he was visiting Jim Donovan
Yes,
out in Shankill.
yes,
And he had got the loan of Stephen Hayes's coat
yes,
because it was a cold night,
Yes.
and it was a fawn coat.
Yes.
So he was coming back, waiting for the bus on the Bray Road,
Yes.
when I think Dinny O'Brien was the name of one of the superintendents or whatever he was, came along and spotted him. So he was arrested.
yes,
And it was on a Saturday, because I had an appointment to meet him that night evening, and I walked up and down Beefield Avenue for 2 hours. So I decided the worst had happened. And I phoned up later on, maybe Monday or Tuesday, but they wouldn't give me any information.
Right. And Stephen Hayes, of course, was the chief of staff of the IRA.
Yes, he was.
And then Daddy was carrying a message to...
Yes, he was carrying a message from him to Jim O'Donovan, yes.
Yes.
Jim O'Donovan was in the ESB. He was an engineer in the ESB, but he was too belonging to the pre-treaty IRA, you know.
Yes, yes.
The old IRA.
I see. So, Daddy, of course, then was arrested and he was interned in the Curragh. And they were up to 2000.
They were up to 2000 there.
Yes.
Yeah. Most them Brendan Beaton,
I see, yes.
to whom he taught Irish.
Yes.
Brendan
And
Beaton
thus
got
the
a
Irish
great love of
scripture.
Irish. Yes.
Yes, yes. And there was a schmozzle there.
Yes, they fired the huts over something or other. I don't know.
Yes.
Something to do with food. So Daddy and Rory and 5 or 6 others
Yes.
were brought up and tried in here in Dublin. And it was, what did I say the name of the
Murnahan.
Judge Murnahan, sentenced him to 7 years.
Yes.
I think Rory got 5, not
Yes.
quite sure. So they were lodged in Mountjoy
Yes.
after that.
Right. And
And Sean Kavanagh was the governor there.
Sean Kavanagh was the governor there, yes. And but while he was in the Curragh, you used to visit, of course. You used to go down by Lough.
Yes, I used to go. Well, you wouldn't visit. I don't think we got many visits in that particular time. Later, you see, he was transferred back there later on.
Yes.
In the early stages, I don't think we got many visits. I don't
Yes.
think so.
There were unusual visiting arrangements in Mountjoy.
Well, there, you see, you weren't allowed to visit.
Yes.
You really were not allowed to visit. And the only time I succeeded in getting in was with the Reverend Frank Roycroft, who was a Protestant minister in Kerry.
Yes.
His cousin, Brendan Hogan, who was a priest in England, and Father Paddy Duffy, who later became head chaplain in the army.
Yes.
They were the only times that I got in to see him.
Yes. And you were the accompanying partner then of one of these clergymen.
Yes.
Yes. And on one occasion then the assistant governor had a message for you.
Yes, the assistant governor came to me. His name was Lacey, as far as I know. and he came out and told me that he had an envelope for me. And it was a wedding ring made out of a sovereign, which his aunt had given to Daddy. And even the gold dust was left in the envelope, and didn't I burn it inside of Mountjoy? I threw it away. I had so many envelopes, you see, the gold dust that was left over from it.
But the important part of the sovereign remained being your
Well,
wedding
of
ring.
course, yes. Which I have yet.
Yes. And that wedding ring was
Which
actually...
I'm still wearing, of course.
Yes. You suggest that you shouldn't wear it too much. It might wear out.
Yes, in case it would wear out, the gold wouldn't be good.
Yes.
Whereas now, how many years old is it? Well over 40 years.
Yes, well, 45 years.
Mm.
So it was actually the assistant governor then that you got your
Yes, that's right.
wedding ring.
That's
Yes,
right,
yes. And you had occasion to give a Christmas present then to Daddy too, of a watch.
Yes, when he was in Haverhill.
Yes.
And to the governor, they weren't allowed watches, of course. But McLennan said he could have it for Christmas Day.
Yes.
And afterwards he lost it.
Yeah.
It disappeared.
Yeah. Your hand down there.
I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah. Your hand down there. Yeah. So after being in Mountjoy then, and then subsequently Haverhill, then Daddy was transferred back then to the
Curragh.
Yes, yes. And subsequently was released on parole.
Yes.
His father
wasn't well.
Yes.
So we have to bring him up to a doctor here, and so that was that.
Yes. But he was due to go back to prison though, wasn't he?
Well, you see, you're given parole for a certain length of time.
Yes.
And when he rang up to say that he couldn't go back, they said you're released.
Yes.
Very was the name. And he said to him, now, you're released now, so go off and get married. But of course, he wasn't allowed to teach, you see.
Yes.
He wouldn't be allowed to teach at all.
Yes. That was 1945.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually did that then. He married in 1946.
Yes.
Yes.
But he did other things. And
yes. And
worked in Cathal's as an Irish print reader.
Yes.
For quite a length of time, and various other things.
Yes. And as you say, Father McCarthy officiated then at the wedding.
Yes, but I must tell you too about that he stayed in 23 Harrington Street. I must tell you about that.
Yes.
Because he had this room, a fairly big room there, and the lady whose house it was asked him, would he mind if another man joined him? So he said, of course he didn't. So the other man turned out to be, what's his name?
Felix Cronin.
Felix Cronin, who actually married Michael Collins's fiancée.
Yes.
And they had two sons.
Kitty Kiernan.
She was Kitty Kiernan,
Yes.
Michael Collins's fiancée. And they had two sons, Michael Collins Cronin and Felix Cronin. And during that year, this was the year now before we got married, Kitty Kiernan, who didn't live, you see, she was a little bit, I think everything she'd gone through affected her mentally, no wonder. And she lived out in Dunleer in a flat out there. Well, she died. So all his pals, Felix's pals, decided the only thing to do was give him piles of whiskey, and he had been drinking very heavily, but with the two sons he decided that he'd have to pull himself together.
Yes.
Which he did.
Yes.
So when this happened anyhow, Felix landed back that night, and he had 2 bottles of whiskey in each pocket, which his friends had given him. So Daddy took the 2 bottles of whiskey and emptied them down the wash-hand basin in the bedroom.
To try and protect him from this.
And he actually, Felix, was Therese's godfather.
Yes. My sister. Yes, Therese.
Yes, Therese.
Right. So can I just go back then to July of 1941? You were on holidays with your friends Ava and
That's
Josie
right,
down
Glenbeck, County Kerry.
Yes.
And we stayed in a house by the lady who owned it was a Molly Lyons, and she used to keep people there. And this man, Jim Hurley, who was the secretary for the Cork University, and had been out in all the troubled times. And he had 3 children. They were quite small.
Yes.
So his wife looked after the 3 children, and we had taken bicycles down to Kerry with us. So he had his bicycle, so we all travelled around together. And of course, he was always talking to me.
The three of
He
you.
find like I know more about understanding better than my other 2 friends,
Yes.
because they were not mixed up in any movement at all.
Yes.
So he said to me on one occasion, "No," he said, "there's a spy in the IRA." And I said, "Why do you say that?" "Oh," he said, "there is. I'm sure there is."
Yes.
And that was now at the end of July of 19, what year did I say?
41.
41.
Yes.
And I came back on a Saturday. It was the last Saturday in July. And I was only in the door when Charlie McGlade and Sean McCrahy, both of whom had come from Belfast, and they told me that Stephen Hayes was a spy, and that they had arrested him, and that he was writing a confession. So later, they gave me the confession, which I typed. Made it. No, there weren't such things as phototypes and that kind of thing.
Yes.
You just had to keep typing each time, so I typed each one.
Yes.
So I naturally was particularly careful that nothing would happen to the original confession. So I found somebody who would look after it, and many years afterwards, they looked for it. The IRA, whoever was there at the time, looked for it. So I was a bit hesitant about handing it back because I didn't know who I was giving it to, you see. So Moss Toomey was somebody that I could depend on.
Mm.
And I asked him, so he said,
He'd look after
give it back. Give it back to them, he said. So that was the end of it. I hadn't any more responsibility.
Yes, yes. And these men, of course, they arrested Stephen Hayes then and brought this.
They arrested him, but then he escaped, and he went straight to the Garda barracks in Rathmines.
Yes.
And Sean McCrahy had been arrested too, but he was charged in the normal way under the tribunal, the military tribunal. But then there was a special tribunal. When this happened, you see, when Stephen Hayes escaped, he was brought up and he was charged
with
kidnapping him, and he was sentenced to death. Which they afterwards commuted to
life imprisonment.
Life imprisonment in Portlaoise.
Mm.
So he was there for quite a long time, and he went on hunger strike, and then he went on thirst strike. And this is the stage now that Noel Hartnett, who was inclined towards that, he was quite a Republican, really. And he was so upset, and he was up on platforms. There's lots of other people too, to say how ridiculous it was to have this man dying on hunger and thirst strike down in Portlaoise. But it didn't matter. Sean McCrahy died on hunger strike. A very fine type of man, I can tell you.
Yes.
And Noel Hartnett lost his job in RTE in a program called Question Time, where he used to go around the country.
Yes.
So this is the interesting thing, that on the day of our wedding, my 2 friends, Elizabeth O'Farrell and Sheila Brennan. Elizabeth was the lady who brought the white flag from the GPO. Surrendering. But the Pierce handed her the white flag to bring out to the British officer. She and her friend, Sheila Brennan, were at the end of the church, and they saw Mrs. Andrews, whom they knew. So when they came out, they berated her for what?
For her son Eamon Andrews.
Eamon Andrews. That he had taken this job and under the circumstances and everything. And she said, she said he took it, she said, because he hadn't a penny to his name.
Yes.
And that was 1946.
And that was the
So
beginning of
he
his
went
broadcasting career. That was the beginning of his
That's the
very
beginning of his career.
distinguished
And goodness
broadcasting
knows
career.
he was known the world over
Yes.
after that.
Yes. And Stephen Hayes then. Now this is the same Stephen Hayes whose
Yes.
coat Daddy was wearing on the night
Yes,
Daddy
this
was
is the
arrested.
same man.
Yes. And he'd been chief of staff of the Air Raid. But
Yes.
he of course was he had escaped and was then
Yes,
free.
well, of course, I couldn't. They said he was a spy, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. I never even met the man, so I couldn't
Yes,
possibly know
yes.
anything about it. No.
But Daddy believed he wasn't, in fact.
Well, he wouldn't agree that he was. You know,
Yes,
he
he
couldn't
didn't
say
know.
if he was or he wasn't
Yes,
really. He
yes.
wouldn't. He never wouldn't accuse him of it at all.
Yes, yes. And Stephen Hayes then lived out a natural life
Yes,
in
and
Wexford.
died in Wexford.
And then died.
Yes, yes.
Yes, relatively recently.
Well, I was sometime now. I suppose it's 10 years ago. I'm sure now.
Right.
But
So, coming to the conclusion then now, really, that political side then, of course, died away, other than your involvement in 1971 through the Prisoners' Dependent, the Common Bond
yes,
in Northern
yes,
Ireland.
Common Bond, yes.
Life took on a more
Well,
sedate nature for all of you, really.
Yes,
Your
of
eldest sister, Nullig, married.
Yes.
She had married, and in fact, yes, her wedding.
Yes, at her wedding, we had a raid at her wedding.
Yes, it wasn't so sedate at all.
Yes, and the best man was arrested and brought down to the bridewell.
Yes.
And one of the guards there identified him as being Liam. I've forgotten his name, but at any rate, he identified him that he wasn't Rory. They came to arrest Rory, and it was Jerry Boland gave the order for that.
Yes.
Kevin Boland's father.
Yes. And again, there's a certain twist in that, with Kevin Boland being the purer than purest
Yes,
Republican now.
exactly. Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
And your sister Nullig, actually, she'd had some little episodes of her own involving collecting messages down the docks and things like that.
Well, this was in the very early days.
Yes.
This would have been in 32 or 33.
Yes.
Yes, she went down. She was asked. We were asked to. I didn't know enough about driving the car at the time, but she knew something, and so she went down to collect something. We didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
and I don't know what she collected, to tell you the truth. But they collected. She was asked to go down, so she went down. They collected stuff and whatever was in it. They collected anyhow. It was dumped somewhere, and she drove the car and parked it outside the house of Conlahan, who was a very well-known solicitor, and told him to mind it, or told somebody there to mind it,
Yes.
and then reported it missing.
Yes. Good decoy.
So, of course, it turned up at Conlahan. But they came and they asked her, so she said, well, she didn't know what had happened to it. It had been taken, and that was all.
Yes.
You know. I must say, I wouldn't have been able to keep a straight
Right.
face on with that kind of questioning.
So despite her sort of fairly turbulent and dramatic wedding reception, she went on then. She married, of course,
Yes.
John Bruton, and
Yes.
John Bruton, of course, has died in recent years. Your sister Brenda then, she
Well, she was in the bank,
yes,
the National City Bank, for quite
Yes.
some time,
yes,
and then she married Pat Ferreter,
yes,
whom she must have met perhaps at my wedding. I'm not quite sure if it was then she first met him. But I don't know, how many years after me did they get married? I can't remember.
yes, just a few years.
So she married Paddy Freytair from Ballinarterry.
Yes, where Debbie had come from.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and your brother
And my
Rory.
brother then, well, he married before me in 1945. He
Yeah.
married Maura McSweeney.
Yes, a daughter of Terence McSweeney.
Yes, the only daughter of Terence McSweeney.
Yes. And he'd had some involvement, of course, in the
Oh,
IRA.
yes,
and
he had been, but yes, he had been, yes.
Yes.
Indeed, but
And indeed, he subsequently pursued a political career of his own.
yes, he did. He joined the Fianna Fáil Party.
Yes, and
I
became a
think he was
senator.
in Clonnapublic there before that, yes.
Yes.
And then he joined the Fianna Fáil, but now he's engaged in
North-South.
North-South.
Yes. He became a senator for a number of
Yes,
years and a
that's
TD,
right,
and
yes, he did.
he's involved now in trying to reconcile with
Yes,
Northern Ireland.
both
Both he and Maura, indeed.
Yes, they're both very much involved in that.
Yes. And your sister Delma then had been at
Well,
school
she,
in Armagh.
yes, and she worked in Kingston for
Yes, until she retired from it some years ago.
years or something.
Yes, yes.
And
And-
Nesta became a doctor.
Yes, and subsequently
And
married.
she married another doctor, Cyril Joyce.
Yes. And you, of course, as we've already said, were married on the 18th of June 1946.
Yes.
And your first child indeed died. The very first child
Yes.
died very shortly after birth.
Bhriain is the eldest, and she was born in June 1948, I think.
Yes.
Yes. And then Austin was born, called after Austin's death, of course, was born in November of 1949.
Yes.
And you were born in 1951, Rossa,
Yes.
called after O'Donovan Rossa, of course,
Yes.
well-known Corkman.
And then Trace.
And Therese is called after, she was born in August 1954.
Yes.
And she was called after the little flower to whom Daddy had a great
Yes.
devotion. He really had.
Yes. And Trace's godfather, of course, was Felix
Felix
Cronin,
Cronin.
whom you've already mentioned.
Mm.
And then,
And then Catherine
yes,
was born in 1956.
yes. And you lived primarily at 11 Red
Yes,
Crescent, having
yes.
moved there from Palmerston Gardens,
That's
where you
right.
lived for a short number of
Yes.
years when Bhriain was a baby. And now that house is occupied by Austin,
By Austin,
and his
yes,
family, Norello.
And his family, Norello, Donnock, Nesta and Cleana
Yes. And you're living now at Stratford in Rathgar.
in Rathgar.
And of course, I'm living in Rathgar,
Wicklow.
County Wicklow. A house indeed which was left to me by my godfather.
By your godfather, Micheál O'Carroll.
Yes, and you made arrangements then for your daughters each to have a home. You're living here with your daughter Maureen, and Therese is living
In her own,
adjacent house.
beside us.
Yes,
And
and
Catherine has an
Yeah.
apartment just nearby.
yes, and then you have of course 3 other grandchildren. Then Aoife,
Yes, Aoife,
Diarmuid,
Diarmuid, and of course the important
famous Gearóid.
Gearóid.
Yes. And you the source of income then to our home growing up was through Kingston's Daddy working at
Yes,
Kingston's.
exactly that. Yes. So we managed to keep things going all
Yes.
right. Well, we didn't live, we weren't frivolous in any way, I can assure
Yes.
you.
Well, I've recollections of you not being frivolous on it. And Kingston's, of course, then closed in
In
1979.
1979,
Yes.
Well, you know, these shops outside the city, the shopping centres,
Yeah.
were opening up.
Yeah.
And the people, the centre of the city was being denuded of
Yeah.
shoppers.
Yeah.
So there was no point in continuing unless you opened out so there was really nobody. I mean, the shop, the Kingstons really now belonged to Rory, you see, and
Yeah.
his sons weren't interested at all in business.
Yeah.
2 of them became doctors and the other
Lecturer.
is a lecturer.
Yes. So Kingston's then, of course, closed down, and indeed, Daddy was quite ill at that time, as we
Yes,
subsequently
that's
discovered.
right, indeed he was.
And he then died in
Yes, he died in
1981.
1981. Yes.
10 years ago, indeed, this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1987, you moved to 14 Stratford in Rathgar, Orwell Road in Rathgar,
Yes.
where
Yes.
you're living a full, an active life of
Yes, very
semi-retirement.
thanks be to God.
Yes. Well, Mother, congratulations on a most interesting life, and thanks very much indeed.
4 years old, didn't go.